Well, welcome to God Talk. How are you today? This is Pastor Dan, and I hope you've watched this for a while, but if this is new to you, we talk about God. I just retired a few months ago. I go around the world doing evangelism and preaching. We have a nonprofit called Grace Force, and we're trying to be a force for grace around the world. But I get to be here at LOBN every week and do God Talk. So here we are today. Hope you'll spend a few minutes with us. There's an old joke I heard at a class at Fuller Seminary a long time ago. Dwight Nelson and I were there. And Peter Wagner told a great joke about Schuller and Billy Graham. And if you don't know, Robert Schuller was the one who helped build the Crystal Cathedral. Great pastor, just died a couple years ago. And of course, Billy Graham just died last year. Wonderful preacher. So they were having a problem with people coming into heaven, and Peter called Satan up and he said, take a group of these people and go back down to hell and bring them back next week. I can't keep up with them all. So Satan took a busload of them. The next week he brought them back to heaven, and he said, don't ask me to do that again. That's it. Why? What happened? He said, I took the bus down to hell. Everyone gets out of the bus. This guy, Billy, puts up a pulpit and tries to convert everybody. And this guy, Schuller, starts raising money to air condition the place. Crazy joke about the fire. Billy Graham is willing to go anywhere to preach the gospel. And Robert Schuller's always trying to raise money. What are you going to do to air condition hell? Billy Graham willing to go anywhere. I had an invitation one time to go to the Philippines. I was in the Philippines here 2 days ago. And it was dangerous. And my Filipino people said to me, not safe to go, Pastor Dan. There was a kidnapping here or whatever over here. You know, there are some issues in some of those places. You better not go. I was scared to go. My wife's scared for me to go. My son to go. Then you think about Daniel. 3 guys that are going to bow down to this image. You'll be put in a fire furnace. If you pray at an open window, you'll be thrown into the lion's den. And how can we preach a book of Daniel? Now I'm scared to go preach in a stadium because something might happen. Obviously, we have a history of honoring those who have taken stands. People who were willing to set sail from Europe and come across in boats and open into a new country and build America to be a place of religious freedom. People who have gone to war for us in the various wars along the way. The people who dumped tea into the bay in Massachusetts. The people who signed the Declaration of Independence and said, here we are. We're going to make a new country, fight a war. I've been to the beaches of D-Day. The people who, under machine guns and bombings and all the rest, came on those landing craft onto the beach, fighting up through machine gun fire, made America safe and the world safe for democracy. The question is, if our country should ever change its character, or wherever you are, and there comes a time when it is not okay to stand up for your faith and your belief and your convictions, will you stand? Or will you bow down? When it's our turn to take a stand. You've heard the old story about the guys with the machine guns who came into a church and said, if you are willing to give up your faith and leave, you can leave right now. Otherwise, you're going to die today. And a bunch of people got up and ran. And the machine gun guys said to the pastor and the church members, okay, you guys go ahead. Now you know who the hypocrites are. Willing to go. Would you have ran, or would you have said, I'm going to stay. I will die for my faith. Romania, famous under Ceausescu, Pastor Laszlo Tokas gave him a new church downtown, 25 people coming in a huge cathedral. Eventually 5,000 people came. He said, they're going to come get me. Take a stand, but don't do anything violent. People took a stand for their faith, their belief, their country. A few weeks later, the country was taken over because some people were willing to take a stand. Second question is, can our country change? Is there any scenario under crises where we would not be a church, a country of religious freedom anymore and separation of church and state? And now a country of political correctness. Watched a program about that this week. Could our country change who we are? So now we're beginning to control what people say and do and believe. Could we come to a Revelation 13 and a Daniel 3? The two are really very similar. You look at them. In Daniel 3, it says they were commanded, when you hear the music, you better bow down to the golden image or you will be cast into a lake of fire, which is, of course, the fiery furnace. In Revelation 13, there's another Babylon, another beast, and it says, forced everyone to worship the first beast, and forced everyone to receive a mark in their hand and in their forehead, or there will be a death decree. And you can either buy or sell, or you will die. And as Daniel 3 was an issue over worship, are you going to bow down unto another image? A lot of us think that maybe in Revelation it'll be about another issue of worship and maybe a day of worship. Will you and I be able to stand to say, this matters enough to me that I will die for that? Anyway, you think about it. Someone asked an interesting question. What about grace in the end of the world, Pastor Dan? I thought we were saved by grace. They had heard a sermon on our sister network, 3ABN, where the preacher said, be careful that you might be deceived in the last days and be lost. Say, yes, we're saved by grace, but what if somehow at the end of the world you're confused and deceived and you bow when the time comes to bow down to the image or stand up? What if you bow? Is there grace for that? We are saved by grace now, today, and forever. Let's be clear. Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. It's always Jesus. Nothing ever changes. We will never offer God anything but the fact that we follow Jesus and we trusted in the Lamb of God and the blood of Jesus. Salvation is not so complicated that you have to know math and be able to do all the Jubilee cycles or to be able to do a chart of the whole 2,300 days or to have some other numerology or to be able to write beautiful Bible studies on all the doctrines. The Bible says in 1 John 5, verse 12, he who has the Son has life. So you have Jesus, you will make it through to the end, one way or the other. Revelation 14, talking about the 144,000, it says that they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And they have the name of the Father and the Lamb on their forehead. So evidently, the only people who are going to make it through that final test, whatever that final test is, will be people who are trusting in the Lamb, and they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Their only hope is the Lamb. Ellen White says the cross will be over the throne of God at the heaven. It's all going to be the cross. So as long as you follow the Lamb, he'll get you wherever you want to go. Revelation 3, verse 5, he who overcomes, he who is an overcomer, will be dressed in white. I will never blot out his name from the book of life. Doesn't that prove that only the people who will overcome every temptation, eating just right and no bad words and keeping the Sabbath perfectly and so on, doesn't that prove only the overcomers, complete overcomers, will make it? My Uncle Maury Venden, I had personal conversations with him about this. Wrestled with that verse, and he said, what is it that we have to overcome? Well, overcome sin. What is sin? He said, whatever is not of faith is sin. So anytime you were trying to do it by yourself, that is sin. Because faith trusts in Jesus. So it means to overcome trying to do it by yourself and following the Lamb wherever he goes. There's a little boy. He got up to read his writing assignment in the class. And the writing assignment says, "My dad fell in the well last week." The teacher said, "Oh no, is he all right now?" The little boy said, "He must be all right because he quit yelling a week ago." We will never be all right. We will never need to stop yelling for grace. We will always need grace. We will never graduate from grace. We will never do it on our own. We will always point to the cross. Revelation 7:9 says, even the final great multitude singing, "Salvation belongs to our God and to the Lamb." Well, what else did we say about this story? Daniel chapter 3, you know the story. And the king puts up an image. He wants his family to be the empire forever, so gold from top to bottom. Brings everybody there, all these officials. And when you hear the music, you better bow down or you're in the fiery furnace. The music plays. 3 guys refuse to bow. Everyone else is bowing. You can see who is standing when everyone else is bowing. Think about that, end of the world. They bring him to the king. "Is it true that you do not serve my gods?" I'll give you one more chance. If you're ready to go bow down, very good. But if you do not, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to deliver you from my hand? Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us. And he will rescue us from your hand, O God. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O King, that we will never serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. You wonder what that must have been like, that little meeting down there on the plain, whatever that was. Thousands of people. I have been to the Pathfinder Camporee in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, with 50,000 people singing worship, picture of Daniel and the image over there. And the king and the music begin to play, and you whisper to the guy next to you, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'll stand if you will." And somehow that little group of 3 got the courage together to say, "Let's stand." 3. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, 3. Let's do this. That was the original church, the Trinity of God, whatever that is. I say to people, was there love before God created anybody, any angels, anybody? Yes, there was inside that God. That now is the church. 3 of them said, "I will if you will," and they stand together as a church. And maybe some of us need to hear that. The power of a church to band together. I wrote in my notes about a day when we were fighting a battle over ordination in my church. I didn't ask for that, didn't mean to be in that. I moved to a church where they asked me to lead a process where we would live in equality at our church. I'm not trying to persuade anybody, it's not the point. There came a night when I was under pressure from our union leadership. They said to me, "Pastor Dan, you're going to lose your church if we're not careful. Men can be ordained and the women can be commissioned. You want to commission those women, no problem. We can all be there and there's no problem. But if you stick to this ordination, there may well be a problem." I was freaked out. I'm 41, 42 years old. Other people had other careers they could fall back on. I could not. This is all I know how to do. I do not want to go sell insurance or sell cars. I'm a pastor. I got 2 little boys. And I called our university president up, Larry Garrity, one of the great human beings of the world. I said, Larry, can I come see you? He said, come on up. I drove up to his house. We love each other. He's older than I am. He was my teacher in seminary, but we did many years together. Senior pastor of the college church, president of the university. My brother. And Jillian Garrity brought out some lemon meringue pie that she had. We'll never forget that pie. And I said, I'm struggling. Should I give up my career for these two ladies, for this battle we're fighting for equality? And we sat there, and by the time we were finished talking and praying about it, we had decided, as the president and the senior pastor, the two leaders of the community, we were going to stand together. I will if you will. So like those three, we stood. And eventually, our conference and our union have gone in the same direction. It's the power. Power of a church. Power of people. These were not priests. They were not pastors. They were not prophets. Just three young men who had been kidnapped from their home and dragged 1,000 miles across the desert. But they stood up for God when everyone else was bowing down. And the whole world heard about it because the king put out a decree. True God, because three young men stood up. Power of a church. Years ago, I went back to speak for a cowboy camp meeting back in Arkansas, northwest corner of Arkansas. Springtown, Arkansas. And a group of people decided they wanted to do something new for God. Decided they would try to have a church for everybody who didn't go to church. Rented a Methodist church for $50 a week, $200. No Sabbath school, just go. Someone said, we'll do Sabbath school if you find us a room. So they found a room. They called the conference president. The Church of Christ down here is willing to rent to the Adventist church. Can we do that? The conference president said the Church of Christ will never rent a church to you. They have never rented to Adventists. I called the conference back up a few weeks later and he said, you were right. They won't rent it to us. But they will give it to us for free. Every week they sent $50, every month $200, and that church never cast a check. That group began to do what they call a cowboy camp meeting. I preached twice for the cowboy camp meeting. 1,000 people come. Unbelievable music and people and food and a great experience. Because a bunch of people said, let's do church in a different way. Let's band together, hold on together. Let's be church, power of a church in the last days. Well, we could say a couple things about the fire. Most religions in the world have a hell and a burning hellfire. Most Christian churches believe in a burning hellfire. Where did the fire come from in Daniel chapter 3? Can we be clear that it was not the God of heaven who says, you better follow me and obey me perfectly or I will throw you in my fiery furnace? It is Babylon. It is the enemies of God who say, you better worship on our side, not God, or we will burn you in our fire. They make the fire. They burn it 7 times hotter. It's not God. Be careful. We're the only one serious church, Jehovah's Witnesses, small group, that doesn't believe that God burns people in hell every day. That's Babylon. That uses that kind of power. God doesn't want anybody to worship him out of force or fear or fire. Perfect love casts out fear, 1 John 4:18, because fire has to do with punishment, fear. God has nothing to do with that. And I'm part of an even smaller group that believes that maybe the fire represents the emotional pain of rejecting God and being in the presence of God, Song of Solomon. And there's going to be a fire, but the fire is after people have made a final choice, after people have died because they rejected life. And the fire cleans up the universe in order for a universe to be made over again. We can argue over it another time. Can we be clear? The Bible says the wicked will call for the rocks and the mountains to fall upon them. Revelation 17 says they will kill each other. The kings of the earth turned against the beast and the prostitute women. Jesus died the second death in our place. And how did he die? Not because of God, but because of people killed him and because sin took him away from the source of life in the universe. The famous story is Sunflower. Simon Wiesenthal was in a Jewish guy called the Nazi hunter. Wrote a book when he was in a hospital as a prisoner in World War II, working in a hospital. Asked him to come up, and they met a German covered with bandages. Said to him, I'm going to die today. I've been at the Eastern Front. We've been killing Jews. We've been burning their houses down. And when they try to jump from the house, we machine gun them to death. I can't get their screams out of my mind. I'm going to die today, and I need someone, a Jew. I need a Jew to forgive me for what we've done, what I've been doing before I die. Would you forgive me? Reached out his hand. Simon Wiesenthal walked away. How do you do that to human beings? Burn their houses down and then shoot them. And then we say that our God of love will destroy and throw into a lake of fire. Careful how we understand this. Yes, it'll be terrible to reject Jesus. It'll feel like fire. Be careful about God burning people. Fire comes from Babylon. Punishment comes from Babylon, not from God. Now we have a couple other questions before we're done today. What about this Psalm 91? There will be this on this side, and there will be this happening to on this side, but it will not come near you. 1,000 can die here, 10,000 over here, but it won't come near you. We claim these promises, and then something bad happens. 9/11, good people died. It wasn't just bad people that died in 9/11. Yes, there were a few people that somehow went back to their hotel to get a camera and they got saved. There were some nice stories. But let's be clear, not every Christian, not everyone who prayed, not everyone follower of Jesus was saved. People died. We can't say that all the good people, all the righteous people are saved and there's only bad things happen to bad people. We know better than that. In Hebrews 11 is pretty clear that even these giants of faith had bad things happen to them. They were tortured, chained, put in prison, put to death by the sword, cut in two, and lived in caves and in holes in the ground. We know that the angels, it says in Revelation 7, hold back the winds of strife, but eventually they have to let go, and there will be some terrible things under the trumpets and under the seals. So let's be very careful. Can we say clearly, God is good? It said the other day, a couple shows ago, God is always yes. But we live in a broken world. If something bad happens to you, or you have cancer or have a heart attack or something else, or there's poor, or you have an issue or a divorce or whatever else, you live a place where there's war, it's not from the heart of God. Babylon. Evil comes from Babylon. And what does God say? And those three young men said, our God is able. The problem is not that God doesn't have the power. God has the power. Not the problem that God doesn't have the heart. God has the heart. Those that said, even if he doesn't, we will never follow you. They trusted in God to take care of it. Most of us want God to take us away from the fire. God didn't do that. Or take the fire away from us. God didn't do that. They got thrown into the fiery furnace. But what God did do was come down and join them in the fire. And God says, I will always be with you. Lo, I am with you always. Someday we will go to a place where there will be no more fire. Someday it'll all be made right. So we learn this from Daniel chapter 3. And God has a way of sending someone down into our life. And a secular pagan king was able to say, didn't we punish 3, and I see 4, and 1 looks like the Son of Man. And Jesus is the Son of Man who came down and went through his own hell, that you and I don't have to go through that hell anymore. He is the one who comes down and joins us in our suffering. So we don't have to be afraid. We can live life without being afraid of the terrorists and other things that the world has, because we have a God who is always on our side. He said, I will never leave you to do it all by yourself. I will join you in the fire. I will join you. If you'll just stand up for me, I will join you there. Don't be afraid. So I thought of just a little crazy connection here. May the 4th be with you. They used to say, may the 4th be with you. But here, may the 4th, he was the 4th, the Son of Man, the Son of Jesus comes down. So I'm willing to go to the Philippines and preach for God because I trust in the 4th. I don't have enough money to do some things right now in my foundation, but I have to trust. Somehow God's going to work it out. We'll find the money to get through it. Whatever you're going through, don't be afraid. We stand. God will come through. When I was young, I got to go see the king and his court. Crazy, crazy man. Grew up in an Adventist church. When he got older, he was a great pitcher. He could pitch underhand. I got to go see him pitch. He could strike everyone out. He could pitch from second base. He could pitch from behind his back. He could pitch with his eyes closed. He was that good. I watched him do it. He only had 3 guys playing with him. They were good guys. It didn't really matter. He probably could do it with you and me. He was that good. He had 4, and he was the 4th. So as long as you have that 4th on your team, that was good enough. And you and I have the 4th. We have Jesus. He's the Son of Man, and he comes to us everywhere and every time. And it has no effect on us.